Hello, my beautiful people. What a miserable day it is outside today. It is blowing a hoolie and on and off raining. Also, I hope you don't get any interruptions from these two. We've got roadworks going on outside, so they, I don't know, are staring out the window and I can hear them grumbling under their breath. I don't know what they're planning on doing, just giving them what for, I'm assuming. Right, so today we are going to be doing something... Hold on a second. No. Right. A second. Right. Let's try that again. Bless Harley, my little staffy. She's an old lady and she can't hear very much now. So occasionally she thinks she hears things and she starts barking and she can't hear you. Tell her it's all right. So we will forgive her. She's 13 years old, so that's okay. Anyway, back to the beginning. We are going to be doing something quite fun today. It is very process based, so this isn't the sort of painting that you can do in one sitting. There's lots of kind of processes in it and stages in which you have to allow it to dry to get the optimum painting out of it. But it is going to be super fun and it's really creative, and yeah, I think you're really going to enjoy it. Plus, it's a wee bit Christmassy. Right, here we go. This is the sort of thing we're going to be doing. It's big, it's bold, it's a bit brash, but it is super, super fun and it's super creative. I'm going to go through the equipment that we'll be using for this today, but I do want to caveat that because this is a very reactive painting. You don't really start with a huge amount of plan, as you will see. So sometimes I add in things that I might find that I need later on in the process, and you will find this yourself when you do this. So I am going to caveat that I might end up adding extra things to this. I'll also put a few examples of other colours and other kind of effects and ways that you can use this now. Okay, I obviously today, because of the time of year it is we are going for Christmassy colours, winter colours, if you don't like Christmassy words. So this is our example for you. Let me move this out of the way and let me show you what we're going to need. We need quite good quality watercolour paper. So I'm using cold press, so the normal kind of what everybody thinks of watercolour paper, the wavy kind, and I have got it in quite a large size, so sort of A3-ish size. I find painting larger when you're painting this far more easier, but obviously you can do it on any size you want. We need masking tape to tape our paper down onto some kind of drawing board and surface that I've got here. The reason for that is we are going to be using lots of paint and lots of water, so therefore the paper will swell, bubble, and we need some way of kind of controlling that a little bit. We need a mixture of paint brushes, whatever you've got. Ideally, you are going to need quite a large paintbrush. I will be using a large flat paintbrush that we've got here. That's a sable one, here's a synthetic one. Or if you've got a round large brush, that will work equally well. Also, ideally, if you've got it, but you don't have to, is a long brush. This is well, what do they call this? This is a rig brush. So you can see here, it is kind of longer than your average. It's not 100% necessary, but would be handy if you do have that. And yeah, this selection. Obviously we need our 2 pots of water, one for washing our brushes and one for mixing our paint. We will probably be needing salt, rock salt. There we go. Cling film. Any old cling film will do. Anything else that we need? Oh, also, I suspect I will be using the Daler-Rowney acrylic white ink. Again, that's probably not entirely 100% necessary. Literally whatever you've got. You will need your watercolour paints. I will be using watercolour paints out of a tube just because they are my preferred choice. But if you only have your watercolour paints that are in a pan, like this one here, if I can open it, that's also absolutely fine. It's just whatever you've got and whatever your preferred thing is. The other thing, or what I would suggest you do, is this is I suppose it's quite difficult to describe. This is very colour led. So what I would suggest you doing, and I think this is great for paintings in general, it doesn't really matter what you're painting, is all of your colours, make sure you have a swatch of all of them. So it's very easy for you, if you're picking colours and choosing colours, it's very easy for you to look at them and see the type of green it is. Is it a more goldy, yellowy green, or is it actually a more bluey green? Again, the same with our reds. Is it more orangey, or is it in fact more bluey? You know, all of those things. And it's really good to have something like this that you can just see, particularly if we're working on instinct, which is what we're going to be doing today. So you need to be able to think quick. Also, to refine that a little bit, what I quite often do is actually, if I've got something in my mind, so at the moment, or what we're looking at today is our wintry sort of foresty green colours, our Christmassy colours, our reds, is to actually then refine that even more and actually do a little swatch. So you can see the type of colours you're using, whether or not they sit well with each other. You know, we want some contrasting colours, we want some complementary colours, and then you've basically, what you've done is you've refined your palette down. That means that you are less likely to end up with a big mishmash, muddy watercolour painting, which is very easy to do, even if it is your job. Right, let us crack on from here. Oakley dokley. One thing I did forget to say what you'll need is you will probably need some sort of tissue or rag. Like I say, we're using lots of paint, we're using lots of water, so the likelihood is we might need this for a bit of mop up. Also, I know you kind of can't see me, it's because I'm standing up, because I'm working on a much larger piece of paper. Obviously I've had to stick the camera up a bit higher, and I'm a shorty and I can't see when I'm sitting down. In fact, whenever I paint like this, I always paint standing up, because just one thing is, this doesn't work very well if you have it on an easel like in front of you. It's actually better flat, but you know, anyway, blah, blah, blah. I digress. So, couple of key points with this, and I know for some people the idea of painting something kind of out of nowhere is a little bit terrifying. It can be a bit scary and a bit intimidating. So if you feel you want to, it is very much okay to use reference. If you've got, we're leaning towards kind of nature, outdoorsy, landscapey type feeling. So if you've got any great photographs that you've taken that you can use as a source of inspiration when you're painting like this, brilliant. That can help you composition wise with it. If you feel like not confident doing that yourself, anything you find on the internet, again, you can use, and again, use that as composition wise. The second really important thing with this is to protect your light, and I will explain that to you in due course. Right, let us begin. So I am picking up my really, really big flat brush. This is purely because I just need to be able to pop paint and water down very, very quickly in this stage. So I'm picking up my clean water and I am saturating the paper. I am paying no mind to where the water is going or anything like that. I am just making sure my paper is wet. This first stage is incredibly loose, and this is wet on wet. So we are putting wet water on paper, creating a wet surface, and then we are using wet paint, putting it in and allowing it to work its magic. So I have saturated the paper, I've filled it all in its entirety, and now I'm just going to start picking up my colours, which I've already got set out in a pan, and we will see what happens. So we just seen that. That is genuinely how fast I paint. So what you can see, now this is where I'm going to explain about what I mean about protecting your light. At this point, I haven't really had much thought other than where my light source is coming. I chose my light source to be kind of coming from the middle, and so that is what I've protected. I have taken my chosen paints that I had already, the greens that I had already chosen, and for want of a better word, I have sloshed them on. I have paid attention. The only thing that I've really paid attention to is where that colour placement is. Is my colour placement balanced? So for instance, you can see I have the dark green coming in from this corner, so therefore I've balanced it out on the other side. You know, in those areas of dark green, I've then perhaps added some of my more limey green in it to give it a little bit of a lift. And what I've done is the paint has been allowed to move as it wants to. This is really uncontrollable at this point. It is just kind of moving, and you can already see some of the shapes that we're making. So we're going to encourage that a little bit more. At the moment, this is what I would call your underpainting. This is me creating a surface to paint on. This isn't our painting, and I want to create texture in that. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to use some salt. Oh, a little bit too much there. And I'm going to take some salt, and you would have seen this in one of my other tutorials. Around my light source area, I am just popping the salt in. And I'm just going to leave that. Again, I've been very kind of loose with it. I haven't really thought about it a huge amount. Now then, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my cling film. Now this, I am going to pop around the outside. So, and we will probably do this again in a later stage. And I am just placing it on the surface. And can you see, I'm just moving it forward to create crinkles. Like you can see the lines in it there. Again, all this is doing is creating a texture and a great surface for us to walk on. For this cling film to work and for the salt to work, the paint does have to be wet. So this whole section or this whole stage of our process has to be done relatively quickly, because if I allow this to dry, we won't be able to get the sort of effect that we're after. And a couple more pieces. See, I think down here it's probably dried too much already, but I'm going to put it in anyway because you never know. And then up here, like that. And the best thing about this is we don't know what's going to happen in here. We don't know what effects we're going to get. We won't know until it's dried completely. And that is what we have to do from now on. So it will take quite a long time to dry because we've used huge amounts of water. So you're probably looking at over an hour. What is good is if you like to paint for a longer period of time, do a couple of these. So you've got sort of 3 or 4 on the go. So you can, by the time you get to your last one, you can go back to your first one again. But either way, I shall see you soon. Okay, we are back. I have my woolly hat on because I am chilly in here. And I have actually left this to dry overnight. Like I say, we're using quite a lot of water, particularly in the early stages. And we need to let it dry properly, otherwise muddy mess will ensue. But I've left it completely as it is, and so we will have the big reveal now. So literally all you've got to do is just pull your cling film off. It'll come off nicely like that. I'm going to put that over the side, and then I'm just going to brush the salt off of it. And then what it's up to us to do is to then evaluate what we've got. If you are doing this at home, the likelihood is you've got something completely different. I get something completely different every single time. It's the beauty and the tragedy of the thing. So look, we can have a look. So here you can see that the salt has made that kind of like washy, pulley in kind of effect that we've got here. None of these marks that we could create if we were actually actively painting it by hand. And you can see what the cling film does. It kind of creates ridges and textures in it. And again, none of those could be created by actual paint. So one of the things that I'm sort of noticing is obviously our paint that we've got on the surface at the moment is quite light, quite transparent. It's not very gutsy. This, I wouldn't even really call this an underpainting. I would call this, we have created a surface for our painting to go over on top of. And so our next stage is to just create a little bit of density of colour. So we're not really painting anything at this point. We're not painting leaves, we're not painting branches or any of those things. I just want to get some colour on here and some density to it. What I will start doing is, because if we look at our little colour swatch here, and I've got some warm reds in there, haven't put any of them in at this point, but what I will do is start popping them in now. So I'm going to show you in real time, and then I'm just going to speed it up for you to have a look at. So again, I'm just picking up the colours that I've got. I'm going to go in. I'm not putting water on the paper at this point. I'm going in literally just with my colour directly onto the paper here. And I'm just, again, exactly the same as what I was doing the first time. I'm kind of following it, and I'm literally just brush strokes to kind of create textures. It's still very transparent. We're still going to see all the marks underneath of it, and I'm just applying it like that, bit haphazardly, paying attention to protecting my light, which is what I was talking about before, and just blending and mixing it in. It really, at this point, is extremely loose. So I'm just kind of creating a balance of colours and tones and textures. That's all I'm doing. I'm not creating any shapes, and I'm protecting my light. So I'm going to speed this up for you to make it a bit more interesting. Okay, so you can see, again, from what we've got here in that beautiful sped up time-lapse video, I've just deposited a lot of green on here. Again, my thought process is just kind of, where does it need a lift? Where does we need more density, protecting our light? Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a little bit of red to it. So I'm going to show you kind of how I go about that, what I'm thinking, where I place it. So I'm actually going to use a slightly smaller brush this time, and I'm going to pick up my red. And again, what I'm doing is I'm just really thinking about where perhaps it needs a bit of a lift. Again, not painting anything, literally just depositing a bit of colour. You will find, because our paper's quite wet, it will bleed, it will blend. That's fine. We're going to tighten all of this up later on. So I'm just kind of placing it in areas. I don't want it to look too uniform. I'm just placing a little bit in areas that I feel like need a little bit of a lift. I'm going to stand up because I like to look down on my work. Anywhere that you put that you're not quite so sure on, just take it out. That's it. So we've got, again, this is now the point that I would call an underpainting. We've got something a bit more substantial. It's a bit more gutsy. You can see, again, the paper, although we didn't cover it with water, the paper is very wet. So what we need to do is, at this point, leave it to dry. If you try painting on top of this, it's just going to all bleed into each other and become one big muddy mess. So I will see you in a couple of hours' time. Okay, step 2, we have allowed to dry completely. So you can see, completely and utterly dry. This is definitely more what I would call your underpainting. Before we kind of created a surface, now it's more of an underpainting. You can see we're starting to get this idea of depth. We're layering up our colours and tones and brush strokes, keep creating this idea of sort of density and a space that we're living in. But we haven't done any kind of descriptive work yet. And I'm going to edge a little bit towards that now. What I'm going to do is, so what I'm looking at, in the same way that I was talking about how looking at our composition and our placement of colours when we're putting our brush strokes in, kind of balancing that out. Now I'm going to look at the shapes and textures we're creating. So we've got a lot of quite heavy, thick bleed marks, brush strokes. We haven't got any rigidity, so I'm gonna mix that up a little bit. And actually what I'm going to use now is my rig brush. So you can see anything that's got a much longer bristle to it. We want a little bit of lack of control. If you don't have a brush like this, one way that you can do a similar technique to what we're doing now is make sure you hold your paintbrush at the end. You want kind of, for what we're about to do, you want a little bit of lack of control of it, because we want it to kind of look random. And what I'm actually going to be doing is, if I bring our example in here, is I'm going to be doing the kind of the brambles, the branches, that sort of look now. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up our Van Dyke brown, wet my brush, and you will need it, particularly at the early stages, you will need it relatively wet, because you want it to flow quite nicely onto the page. I'm not sure if this is wet enough, we'll see. And what I'm going to do is, how I'm thinking about it, is I'm thinking about cutting across the marks that I've already made. So, and I'm holding the brush at the end, and I'm just, and as we get to the end, we taper off. So we have a harder pressure at the beginning that we lighten and lighten and lighten, and that gives us our nice tempered, tapered ends. And then what I want to do is, like I always speak about, is I want to kind of blend it away a little bit. So I'm just, can you see, I'm just fanning out the brush on one of the edges, so the inside edges, and I'm just, because we don't want it obvious, we want it, again, these are going to sit, hopefully some of these are going to sit in the background, and I just want to blend them out a little bit. Any kind of bits like that, just use a bit of water. We want them, remember how I often speak about how we want things to come from nowhere and disappear into nowhere. So can you see how that then looks like it's part of the painting rather than placed on it? I'm going to show you again. So again, I'm going to perhaps come in from the other side. And we're looking about balance, compositionally, we're looking about balance. So again, pick up your paint, start with the end, and you just want to kind of drag it across the page. And as you get to the end, just lifting it up so it disappears. So there, we've got our hard edge. So we're going to wash our paint off, and then on, I'm putting on the underneath, depending on what your composition is. I'm just feathering away the inside of that, so we get like a really quite seamless blend. This is a really good way of, you know how like people quite often struggle to get like hard edges when it comes to watercolor paint, because it tends to be so soft. This is quite a good way of doing that. So can you see how I'm sort of creating the idea of a branch, but we're not quite sure yet. We can firm all of that up. Right, I am going to put this in fast motion, so you don't have to hang around watching all of this, and I will stop it at the end and show you what we've done. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing here. I said to you right at the very beginning that a lot of this painting is instinctive. So there tends not to be a massive plan at the beginning. It's about kind of creating shapes and textures and then reacting to what you've got there. So you can see where I've started creating, again, a lot of this is going to be background stuff, but I've started creating the idea of brambles, vines kind of intertwining in amongst each other. Not a huge amount of detail, just that kind of mark that suggests that. Then when I was looking at it, I felt like it needed a bit more density to it. You know, like we've only done 2 layers, this is our 3rd, you know, like I felt like it needed a bit more to it. So what I've done is I've added more of my darker green in, so you can see. And what I have started doing, whereas before the brush strokes were very loose, very kind of splish splash splosh, I've started just kind of thinking about the sort of shapes that we want to introduce. So because obviously we're thinking of like Christmassy brambles, holly and things like that. So here we go, here's a couple of examples there. So you can see, although I haven't actually painted anything, I have started to kind of suggest those shapes there. Nothing any great detail, because remember, when we're creating depth in a piece of work, what we're doing is, if we think about how we see the world, like if I'm looking at something in front of me, items that are in the background, you tend not to be able to see a huge amount of detail on. You get the general shape of it, you get the general colour of it, the general gist of it. As the items in whatever you're looking at creep forward in your vision, you see them more clearly. So that's what we're doing here. We're creating our depth, we're creating our background. So we're giving an expression of the shape. We're not actually painting it, but we're certainly thinking about it. The other thing that I've introduced is I've actually introduced a different colour. I felt like the red we used, which was, I believe, or Windsor orange, was a little bit too zingy, a little bit too toy boxy, and I want this to look natural and earthy. So what I've actually done is I've introduced this colour here. You can see it there, and obviously you can see it on our painting here, and it's actually pereylin violet. Again, I will put all of the details in the bio for this, and you can see I've just kind of, it's nice to have that zingy red in the background, but I've kind of sort of gone over it with that violet, just so that everything tonally is sitting in the same kind of warm mulled winey space. And what I'm going to just show you now, just as a little bit, is, again, I'm going to start introducing the idea of berries. So I'm just going to show you how I would do that. We have got quite wet paper here, so this is the very beginnings of it, so we will tighten it up, but I will just give you an idea. So see kind of here where I've introduced our violet colour, just on top of that I'm just going to pop a little circle, so kind of, you know, like how you would paint your berries if you were, you know, drawing with a pencil. But I don't want to leave it like that, because again, that is, it looks like it's plonked on, it looks like it's stamped on. So I'm washing, once I've deposited the paint on my surface, I am washing it off and then popping a bit of water on my brush. And you'll see I'm using a slightly smaller brush here again. And I'm just adding the water to that, and I'm sucking some of it up and kind of moving it about. So you look, can you see how we get kind of like the outline of a berry? But it's not painted, and again we will kind of refine that as we go on, but it's just our beginnings of this idea of like shape and form. There we go, just show you again. So just pop in a couple of little dots in there like that. Then I'm washing the paint off and just kind of blending it away. You have, when you're painting like this, you have to kind of be willing to lose as much as you put down. And like I always say, I'm a big fan of things not looking like they've been painted on. So can you see where we kind of got this hint of berries going on, but we haven't actually painted them. Hello and welcome to our brief interlude in what is otherwise a very slick tutorial, as always. This little clip in the middle here that you're going to see, during my filming process, I foolishly recorded from above in slow motion. So to save you from having to watch 13 minutes of my hands slowly moving across the page, I thought I would cleverly click in either side of me, I don't know how it will work, of where we were at that point, and just go talk you through what I was doing there. So I was saying that at this point here, or here, we have reached what I like to call the ugly stage. You will find in all paintings like this, when you are not really working with any particular framework, when it's all a bit like kind of loose and gestural, you will get to a point where you're not sure where it's going to go. You don't know if it's going to go in the bin or it's going to go in the wall. And what I would say to you is be brave and carry on. And at that point is usually the point where you start having to tighten up your painting. So no more kind of washing and splashing necessarily. At that point it tends to be about refining, and in our case of what we're doing, our holly, our berries, our brambles. So that is what you will see me doing next. Super, super speedy. And I'm going to pray to the art gods that this tutorial works, because I've been having a run of bad luck with these recently. Okay, let's have a look, see where we are right now. So I have started refining. You can see that I have actually kind of painted some berries, and that I have started painting the shapes of our holly and things like that. Now, it is extremely important with a painting like this to take it really slow and steady. As soon as you start kind of losing control of the paint or anything like that, that is a good time to stop and let it dry, or just walk away from it, because there's lots of going on. We don't have a real kind of structure to this. We don't have an outline or a framework that we're working within, so it's very easy for us to kind of get lost and lose ourselves in it. If you try these at home, you will probably find that a lot of them don't quite go to plan. You overwork them, all of those things. That's absolutely fine. This is all a learning curve. So what I've done is I've started refining. I've started using a darker brown. I was using a darker brown so that we can get the branches in a little bit more. I've started using my brighter red again to kind of lift it up. And I just feel like I'm at a point now where I just need to kind of leave it. The one thing that I'm going to do now is, this is very dense through here. We're starting to lose a bit of light, a bit of texture. I just want to lift that up a little bit. We're bordering on heading towards where we're Muddiesville. So I'm going to use my Daler-Rowney white acrylic ink. And I am going to put it in a little, this is just a lid of, you know, an old jar or anything like that. And I'm going to put it in there. The reason for that is because where it's acrylic, it dries hard. You can't reactivate it like you can with your watercolour paint. And so I don't want to put it in my palette because, you know, it's very difficult to get out. So you can see there, it's just a little pipette. And I'm popping that in there, because that can just be thrown away, it doesn't really matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by flicking some of the white paint through here. So it looks like snow, frost, you know, all of that jazz. So I'm just going to pick it up with my toothbrush. It's just an old toothbrush. And I'm just going to unceremoniously flick it on. Just through it. I generally like more concentration around the bottom. I think it kind of makes it look a little bit more like it's meant to be there, rather than we've just thought, sod it, let's just flick paint. And there's always the fear that you can go too mad with it. So there we go. That's what I've done so far. And then what I'm going to do is, let's see if we've got a, this might work. The paint might be a bit too, I'm then going to pick it up with a paintbrush, grab another paintbrush and just, oh, that's just gone right in my face. Do it the other way around. This creates a little bit more. So the difference between doing it the two ways is, with the toothbrush, you get a very fine misting. With a paintbrush and tapping it like that, you get slightly heavier dots. So it just, again, we're all about creating depth and contrast. So this is just another way we can do it. And then what I'm going to do is, from there on out, I'm going to leave it to dry completely and wipe the paint off my face. I'm going to leave it dry completely, and then we'll evaluate, and we are so close now. Final furlong, guys. I've allowed this to dry again. That really is the key with these paintings, because otherwise they can just end up like a bit like a muddy mess. You can see that we've tightened things up a little bit. So now, literally, this last little step is literally just tweaking a couple of bits. So what I'm going to do is some of my branches, I'm going to make that a little bit more. Some of them are a bit wishy-washy, so I'm going to make them that little bit more substantial by using my darker brown, which is sepia. And then what I'm also going to use is I'm going to use my white ink again, and I'm going to highlight some of them, like we can see in our example here, just to give that effect of perhaps frost or snow on top of them. And then finally, I'm probably going to spray a little bit more of our white ink around the bottom, and then we hopefully should be finished. So let's move on in fast motion. Hello my lovelies, I come from you with just the camera above my head because I'm having technological issues, as per usual. It is not my forte, guys, I cannot help that. I also have accidentally spilt this little dollop of white ink there, but I'm going to roll with it because, you know, sometimes accidents make the best paintings. I would like to call this painting that we've done finished now. So it's a really, I say easy, I know this has taken me a long time. It is easy, it's just you have a lot of stages that you have to wait and let it dry. But it's a fun thing to do. That's why you can have lots on the go. And you can see what I've done is that these last stages was literally the tiniest little bits where I'm darkening some of the branches slightly, adding a little bit of highlight so it brings them forward in the painting, again, encouraging that depth. Added a couple more berries here and there just to break it up. That's what we're doing. We're breaking up the green with the red berries there. And then just added a bit more white ink there again, just to lift the whole thing so that it kind of looks lighter and airier rather than thick and dense. And all it is just to give us that vibe of brambles, holly. We've got our Christmassy colours. So yeah, here's our finished piece. It still needs to dry, but I think we've done all right. Hello my lovelies, I come from you from a rather unusual angle. You also get to see the not so Insta ready version of my art studio. The bits that you don't see, actually for me this is actually quite tidy, but I come from you this angle because I have yet again had problems with technology, and my memory card on my camera isn't working. Sorry, I know it happens every time, but I am analog, I'm not digital. But thanks for watching the tutorial. It's been quite a fun one to film, although it has taken me quite some time. Please like, follow, subscribe, share, do it. Let me know how you get on, all of that jazz. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas.